on being you, the third principle. We affirm and promote the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations.
For our opening words today, I'd like to return to the writings of James Baldwin, from which we spoke about in January. James Baldwin wrote in 1962, "It is, alas, the truth that to be an American writer today means mounting an unending attack on all that Americans believe themselves to hold sacred." And then he also wrote in a 1964 essay called The White Problem. Baldwin placed a lie at the heart of our country's founding. "The people who settled the country had a fatal flaw," said Baldwin. "They could recognize a man when they saw one. They knew he wasn't, the black man wasn't, anything else but a man. But since they were Christian, and since they had already decided that they came here to establish a free country, the only way to justify the role this chattel was playing in one's life was to say that he was not a man. For if he wasn't, then no crime had been committed. That lie is the basis of our present trouble." From the writings of James Baldwin.
Let those who live in every land declare that fear and war are done, joined by the labor of their hands, in love and understanding one. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands of far and nigh. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Our speaker today is Reverend Bill Breeden. His topic is Beginning Again, James Baldwin and Eddie Glaude Jr. with wisdom for those who are willing to do just that.
Good morning to the good folks in Terre Haute and members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Terre Haute. I'm honored to speak with you again today, although we had to do it by virtue of the internet and by my rather primitive abilities to video with my phone. Be honest with you, it's not my favorite way to be. I'd much rather be there with you. I will tell you that I'm going to leave my hat on because I'm in the sanctuary of the UU Church in Bloomington. And it's kind of chilly in here, and I don't really want to warm the whole sanctuary just for the time that it takes me to do this. So I leave my hat on, and I also have some gloves on my hand, and that's where we're going to roll today. This month is Black History Month, African American history, however you want to say it. I think it's one of the most important months of the year. It's something we need to take advantage of, to educate and to talk about the issues facing particularly people of color in the United States of America. So I've decided to give voice this Sunday to several black writers rather than and making a few comments along the way, but I want to share with you several pieces of poetry and other items from black writers, and I hope that you will find it meaningful. Langston Hughes, a wonderful writer of the English language, a wonderful voice for the black people of America and the world. The Negro speaks of rivers. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when the dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. And then a piece entitled Negro. I am a Negro, black as the night is black, black like the depths of my Africa. I've been a slave. Caesar told me to keep his doorsteps clean. I brushed the boots of Washington. I've been a worker. Under my hand the pyramids rose. I made mortar for the Woolworth building. I've been a singer, all the way from Africa to Georgia. I carried my sorrow songs. I made ragtime. I've been a victim. The Belgians cut off my hands in the Congo. They lynch me still in Mississippi. I am a Negro, black as night is black, black like the depths of my Africa. And another entitled American Heartbreak. I am the American heartbreak, rock on which freedom stumps its toe, the great mistake that Jamestown made long ago. Africa. Sleepy giant, you've been resting a while. Now I see the thunder and lightning in your smile. Now I see the storm clouds in your waking eyes, the thunder, the wonder, and the young surprise. Your every step reveals the new stride in your thighs. And one called Democracy. Democracy will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my own 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in the great need. I live here too. I want freedom just as you. The Negro Mother. Children, I come back today to tell a story of the long, dark way that I had to climb, that I had to know in order that the race might live and grow. Look at my face, dark as night, yet shining like the sun with love's true light. I am the child they stole from the sand 300 years ago in Africa's land. I am the dark girl who crossed the wide sea, carrying in my body the seed of the free. Bringing the cotton and the corn to yield, I'm the one who labored as a slave, beaten and mistreated for the work that I gave. Children sold away from me, husband sold too. No safety, no love, no respect was I due. 300 years in the deepest south, but God put a song and a prayer in my mouth. God put a dream like steel in my soul. Now through my children, I'm reaching the goal. Now through my children, young and free, I realize the blessings denied to me. I couldn't read then, I couldn't write. I had nothing back there in the night. Sometimes the valley was filled with tears, but I kept trudging on through the lonely years. Sometimes the road was hot with sun, but I had to keep on till my work was done. I had to keep on, no stopping for me. I was the seed of the coming free. I nourished the dream that nothing could smother deep in my breast, the Negro mother. I had only hope then, but now through you, dark ones of today, my dreams must come true. All you dark children in the world out there, remember my sweat, my pain, my despair. Remember my years heavy with sorrow, and make of those years a torch for tomorrow. Lift high my banner out of the dust. Stand like free men supporting my trust, believing in the right, let none push you back. Remember the whip and the slaver's track. Remember how the strong and struggle and strive still bar you the way and deny you life, but march ever forward, breaking down bars. Look up ever at the sun and the stars. Oh, my dark children, may my dreams and my prayers impel you forever up the great stairs, for I will be with you till no white brother dares keep down the children of the Negro mother. The words of Langston Hughes from his book, selected from the book, The Selected Poems of Langston Hughes. And now another book. This is a book entitled Come Sit With Me, Life in Poetry, Prose, and Plays by Dr. Gladys Devane, illustrated by Danielle Bruce. Dr. Gladys Devane is a member of our Unitarian Universalist Church in Bloomington, Indiana. She wrote this story, she says, because of a true happening to her own son. She says, being black in America is a cloak that cannot be shed. It's a cloak that hangs like an invisible anchor around the neck of every black person in this country. It is a pre-existing condition that can be especially devastating to black men, young and old. Any black man whose life does not reflect this is indeed an exception to the rule. Whether rich or poor, educated or uneducated, professional or non-professional, no black man is exempt. Ask Henry Louis Gates. Inside the Skin of a Black Man is my commentary on the ongoing troubling relationship between black men and our American white police force. This poem recounts an incident that happened to my son. There is nothing poetic in the unfolding of this event, but I chose to write it with a lyrical scheme, a rhyme scheme, holding that this would heighten the reader's awareness and retention of the key points. By Gladys Devane. Inside the Skin of a Black Man. He left the sports bar where he had chilled with friends, where they'd shot some pool, their usual trend. His seatbelt he hooked, his mirror in place, his cell phone beside him, just in case. As he drove from the lot, a white car he saw. Not much thought he gave it, he wasn't breaking the law. He turned left onto the street, his turn was solid. The white car turned and closely followed. He stopped at every sign, each light he obeyed. His eye on the road, each move fixed and stayed. 2 miles he drove, carefully watching his speed. 2 miles it followed without cause or need. He tried to stay calm and move with precision, taking utmost care to avoid a collision. A right turn he made, his signal light blinking. A right turn it followed, no sign of shrinking. Through the gates of his addition, in 2 blocks or 3, he thought, I'll be home where I'm safe and free. But at the cul-de-sac, a red light did flash, punctuated by the pulse of a siren blast. He pulled to the curb and readied himself for the rest. He rolled down the window and took a deep breath, placed his hands on the steering wheel in plain sight, and stared straight ahead to be courteous and polite. He braced himself for the officer's words. "Why are you in this neighborhood?" is what he heard. Surprised, he said, "I live in this neighborhood, officer, sir." "This neighborhood," the officer repeated. "This neighborhood?" as if to infer. "And where do you live?" was the officer's reply. "At the end of this drive," he said, masking a sigh. "The end of this drive," the officer repeated, his patience and composure almost depleted. "What did I do, sir?" he politely persisted. "License and registration," the officer insisted. His license and registration to the officer he handed. "Did I do something, sir?" he respectfully demanded. "Have you been drinking?" the officer did pry. "No, sir, not at all," was his earnest reply. "Not at all? Nothing to drink?" was the officer's reply. "I had not a single drink. Your test will say." "Step out of the car. Keep your hands in sight." He stepped from his car into a blinding light. The officer examined the front seat, then the rear, looked at the license and at him with a sneer. "Sir, I live on this street, on this very block. The address on my license is the address on that box." His manner was calm, but his voice was stressed. He had lived this scene more than he'd like to confess. The officer, looking sheepish, handed the license back. "There's been burglaries in this neighborhood, just keeping track." "Yes, sir," he said through tightly clenched teeth, hiding the anger that simmered beneath. The officer turned and walked to his car. "Have a nice night," was heard from afar. Revving his engine, the white car sped away as the driver stood there in utter dismay. The driver got in his car and sat for a spell. He breathed in deeply, his anger to quell. He drove into his garage and closed the door, where his dignity at last he could fully restore. Back home in bed, and that's a good place, where he can finally relax and forget about race. But still, he feels only safe as one can, living inside the skin of a black man. I am constantly reminded, as I watch the events in our culture on television, reminded today by the Washington Post that police killings in America set a new record last year in 2021, even after all that has been happening in the last 4 to 5 years, a new record high in police killings. It's something we need to consider. It's something we need to remember. It's something to recognize that I, as a white man, have never feared immediately when a police pulled me over. And I've been pulled over many times. I'm usually relaxed and it just doesn't even bother me to see the lights flash. But that's because my skin is not black. We need to remember that. This month, Black History Month, we need to remember that. Finally, I would like to recommend to you another book, and I know I don't have much time to get into it, but I'll share a few things from it. It's a book by Eddie Glaude Jr. It's entitled Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own. And I think it's a book that's well worth your read. It's hard to put down. Eddie is a wonderful writer himself and a great historian of literature. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "It is possible to live with almost no memory, but without forgetting, it's quite impossible to live at all." He was referring to history. Eddie Glaude says, "But the National Memorial for Peace and Justice represents a traumatic history, and it isn't easily forgotten, if at all. Our bodies carry trauma forward. The history of racial trauma lives on and moves us about in ways we don't often realize. It grounds our fears, and whether we know it or not, it affects our dreams. In places all over the South and the country, the legacy of this terror and trauma continues to haunt. The memorial confronts the trauma directly and offers us, in its own way, a chance to begin again. Stevenson, the director of the memorial and the one who brought it into existence, put it this way: I want there to be repair in this country, not just for the communities of color that have been victimized by bigotry and discrimination. I want it to be for all of us. I don't think we can get free until we are willing to tell the truth about our history. I do believe in truth and reconciliation. I just think that truth and reconciliation are sequential. You can't have reconciliation without the truth. After visiting that memorial to peace and justice in Montgomery, Eddie wrote this: irony abounds. The National Memorial for Peace and Justice opened in 2018 in the middle of Donald Trump's first term. As I have argued, Trump's election represents our after times. All that he stands for reasserts the lie in the face of demographic shifts, and political change represented by Obama's election and the activism of Black Lives Matter. Trump has intensified the Cold Civil War that engulfs this country. He and the people who support him are just the latest examples of the country's ongoing betrayal, our version of the apostles of forgetfulness. When we make Trump exceptional, we let ourselves off the hook, for he is us just as surely as the slave-owning founding fathers were us. As surely as Lincoln, with his talk of sending black people to Liberia, was us. As surely as Reagan was us with his welfare queens. We've been, for the last half a century or more, on a pilgrimage of forgetfulness. We're reminded when the riots happen. We're reminded when people rise up. But then we forget again. And the president comes along, as Reagan did, and talks about the shining city on the hill, and we believe the lie all over again. It is that lie that we have to address. That is the lie we have to address. The Indiana House, just passed a bill called HB 1134. If you haven't heard about it, then you're not paying attention. The Indiana Teachers Association has come out against it. Most educators have come out against it. I have come out very strongly against it, and I hope that you will too. The bill basically, it puts into law what has been going on for a long time, and that is the resistance to teaching history. Teaching history. I didn't know anything about the slaves landing at Jamestown in 1619. I was taught American history. I was taught American history in a little school down here in Odin, Indiana, and had wonderful teachers. But the history books didn't tell us about the slaves that landed 1619 at Jamestown. The history books told us about the good Christian people who overcame all kinds of obstacles to get to the land of America and establish a free country, freedom of religion, and all those things. That's what we were taught. Because of the prophets of forgetfulness, the apostles of forgetfulness, we were not taught the truth. I knew nothing about the Oklahoma massacre of Wall Street in Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street. I knew nothing. Growing up in southern Indiana, I thought lynching was just a southern thing. That's where they lynch people. By the time 60s come around, I'd started learning some history. But one of the most famous lynchings in history took place right here in Indiana. We have hidden that history, and we have been sold a lie about the shining city on the hill. And because of that lie, people from all over the world struggle to get here, leave their war-torn countries, leave their Central American countries that we have been destroying for years, to come here because they think this is a shining city on the hill. We need to begin to tell the truth about our history, and HB 1134 is a lie. It is an attempt by the Indiana Republican House to outdo the Texas Republican House and take away the ability of our teachers to teach. It will destroy education in Indiana. Finally, I want to read to you Toni Morrison's words at the funeral at the Cathedral of St. John Divine on December 8, 1887, the funeral of James Baldwin. She wrote, "Yours with the courage to live life in and from its belly as well as beyond its edges, to see and say what it was, to recognize and identify evil but never fear or stand in awe of it. It is a courage that came from a ruthless intelligence married to a pity so profound it could convince anyone who cared to know that those who despise us need the moral authority of the former slaves, who are the only people in the world who know anything about them, and who may indeed be the only people in the world who really care anything about them." That's important. James Baldwin expressed a love not simply for black people, of which he was one. He expressed a love for America. He expressed a love for all of us. Let me read that again. "It is a courage that came from a ruthless intelligence married to a pity so profound it could convince anyone who cared to know that those who despised us, quote, need the moral authority of their former slaves, who are the only people in the world who know anything about them, and who may be indeed the only people in the world who really care anything about them." James Baldwin and Eddie Glaude Jr., and those who fight for peace and justice in this country, under the banner of Black Lives Matter and under many other banners, who fight for peace and justice in this country, care far more about you than the radical right, racist, political force that we are facing now in this country. And it is time for us, it is time for me to make our voices heard. I hope you will read these books. I hope you will consider the lie we have been told. I hope you will seek the truth of our history and bring forth a love of this country that says we can do better. We may not be the shining city on the hill, but we are a people who can love and can do great things. And that's what I want to see in my life. For my grandchild and my grandchildren and their children and all of our children for many generations. Blessed be. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope before long we can meet again together. Amen.
Circle
closing words this morning come from the epilogue in James Baldwin's book, No Name in the Street. He wrote, "An old world is dying, and a new one, kicking in the belly of its mother time, announces that it is ready to be born. The birth will not be easy, and many of us are doomed to discover that we are exceedingly clumsy midwives. No matter, so long as we accept that our responsibility is to the newborn, the acceptance of the possibility contains the key." There's a new world being born every day. In America, we are going through a rebirth. It will be painful. Unitarian Universalism is going to go through a new birth. It will be painful, but it will be a blessing. And I trust we will be a part of it and accept our responsibility to be so. Blessed be. Go in peace. Amen.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace, know that you are loved, and that your life is sacred.